Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. James. I'm one of the assistant deans in the office, of diversity and inclusion. And for this language and diversity session, we welcome to our campus virtually, although I can't wait till it's in person, Dr. Lisa Lowery. Dr. Lowery is a proud Grand Rapids native, Grand Rapids, Michigan native, and she received her Bachelor of Science degree in microbiology with honors from Michigan State University. Dr. Lowery completed her medical degree from the University of Michigan, and then she completed a combined internal medicine and pediatric residency at Spectrum Health, and that was a combined Michigan State Grand Rapids campus. She then followed her residency with a subspecialty fellowship in adolescent medicine at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. While at Johns Hopkins, she obtained a Master's of Public Health in the Department of Population and Family Health Sciences with her Certificate of Concentration in Maternal and Child Health. More contemporarily, Dr. Lowery is the Section Chief of Adolescent Medicine and an Associate Program Director for the Combined Internal Medicine Pediatrics Residency Program. She's an Associate Professor at Michigan State University College of Human Medicine, Department of Pediatrics and Human Development, and in April 2020, she started at Michigan State University College of Medicine as the Assistant Dean for Diversity and Cultural Initiatives. On top of all of those achievements, she is also the president of the West Michigan Medical Society and National Medical Association, NMA, and serves on the Urban League of West Michigan Board of Directors, the Cherry Health Foundation Board, Wedgwood Christian Services Board of Directors, and Grand Rapids LGBTQ Health Consortium Board of Directors. And then on top of that layer, I can say from personal experience that Dr. Lowery is an exceptional human being. She cares deeply not only about the issues that we're going to talk about and the definitions that we're going to talk about tonight, but is dedicated to the improvement of the lives of everyone, including her colleagues. And I was proud to be one of them. And I'm very thankful to have met her and to have her be an important part of my career. And it is an honor for her to come and talk to us tonight about moving the conversation forward and looking more at some of these definitions and barriers as we currently construct them. So, Dr. Lowery, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Dr. James, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I do look forward to hopefully seeing you in the future. I am going to do the infamous share my screen, so hopefully everything works out. And slideshow from beginning. So yes, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to be here. And when Dr. James invited me to speak, I was very happy to come, and I said, "Well, what do you want me to talk about? What type of things have other um, presenters spoken about?" And I was very impressed with the topics and the breadth and depth of what you all have had. And so, um, hopefully, we decided to just have a little bit of what we would say, I guess, maybe some didactics, for lack of a better word, but then really wanted to have more of, hopefully, a conversation. Um, and I know you all have hopefully talked about or discussed things like racism, and or I call it the R word of late. If we've become, if one of the things, so I started, as Dr. James stated, in April of 2020. So I started my new position in diversity, equity, and inclusion at Michigan State. Even though it was still on the campus I'm very familiar with, still had always been a part of the medical school in some way, but this was a newly created position. And nothing's like starting a new position in the middle of, number one, a pandemic. And then slowly we had George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. But one of the things that, if there was any good that came out of 2020, I think it was hopefully enlightening to some and an opportunity for us to say to others, that's what we were talking about. And so when we talk about racism, one of the things, and I found the slide that held so much input because we're in healthcare. So we're supposed to be worried about healthcare outcomes. However, if we look at racism, and I'm not even going to go into the social determinants of health and things like that, because that's what those are. But racism can be really entrenched and is entrenched in all of those things: our education system, our justice system, environmental exposure, access to healthcare, housing, public safety, all of those things. We know we are not all on equal footing. And then we have poor outcomes. And so this quote I found by Beverly Daniel Tatum, and it says, the culture of racism is like smog. Sometimes it's so thick, it is visible. Other times it's less apparent. But always, day in and day out, we're breathing it in. And I think for one of the things that, when I said some of the aha moments for 2020, some of us were able to say, look at what we've been breathing in all this time. And unfortunately, a lot of people still don't think we're breathing in this smog, racism laden air, but we know it. Um, so one of the things I want to just briefly touch on this evening is really about the four eyes of oppression. Some people have coined it the four eyes of racism. But when we talk about the four eyes of oppression, there's ideologic, where's the system of beliefs or ideas. And this is just that the idea that the core is that one group is somehow better than the other. And then there's institutional oppression. And this is the idea that the group is better than another group and has the right to control what the other group gets. And this is vetted in our institutions. And then there's the interpersonal oppression. And this the idea that one group is better than the other and has the right to control the other. And we then control it and then control it in those institutions and in the ideologies. And then what a lot of we do deal with, and what we see our patients and families deal with, is that internalized oppression. And this is that within, and with the groups who suffer the most, usually are marginalized and minoritized groups, and that we internalize that ideology of inferiority. And so, how many times when we've talked to our medical students, our minority medical students, and they have, well, I don't know if I feel like I should be here. How many times have we ourselves really felt, we have a fancy word called the imposter syndrome. Should I be here? But I'm gonna pause there because I have a video. Before I go on. So then we have internalized oppression. Then we have not only those who have us who have internalized oppression, but those who have internalized their privilege. It could be not realizing the meritocracy that they live in, feeling like they got here because they're just so special. And what happens is people who often benefit the most from these systems of internalized privilege, they then internally and involuntarily accept these stereotypes and false assumptions. So now I think I have my video. Hopefully it loads okay. Take a little while, even though I loaded it earlier. Unfortunately, last time it took this while. And it's only about a 3 to 4 minute video. It's loading slowly but surely. And I thought, having tried it out earlier, Dr. James, it wouldn't take this long to load, but we'll just have a little webinar grace here.
And while we're waiting, just a question that maybe we can talk about.
Oppression. It's a word that's often used as a blanket term, but there's actually a whole lot more to it. There are 4 interlocking aspects of oppression: ideological, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized. And it might seem like a small difference, but it's very important to be able to distinguish between each kind, because understanding oppression is the first step to fighting it. Let's start with the core at the heart of every form of oppression: ideology. Every system of oppression comes from the idea that one group is somehow better than another. Ideological oppression starts when the dominant group associates positive qualities with itself and negative qualities with the marginalized or othered group. Ideological oppression describes the deeply ingrained social root of inequality. It's the larger overarching idea that leads to the isms. For example, the idea that black people are dangerous is ideological racism. The idea that poor people are lazy is ideological classism. Ideological oppression leads to institutional oppression. Institutional oppression is the way that systems and institutions manifest the dominant ideology. Institutions control access, who is able to get to what and how. This includes legal rights, police practice, access to medical care and education, public policy, political power, and media representation. For example, when women make 2/3 of what men make, that's institutional sexism. When a building is constructed without wheelchair ramps, that's institutional ableism. All of this leads to interpersonal oppression. Interpersonal oppression is probably the easiest to recognize because it happens all around us. Interpersonal oppression is the way that people play out discrimination and violence on each other. It can take the form of microaggressions, jokes, stereotypes, and harassment. For example, when a student is bullied for being gay, it's interpersonal homophobia. When a Muslim person is told that they're a terrorist, it's interpersonal Islamophobia. And all those forces, ideological, institutional, and interpersonal, lead to internalized oppression. Internalized oppression is the way that people with marginalized identities internalize narratives of their own inferiority. It's what leads people to feel less than. This is the end goal of oppression. The oppressive party doesn't need to exert force any longer because the marginalized group is enacting oppression on itself to maintain the status quo. It's important to remember that it's never a marginalized person's fault that they feel internalized oppression. It's simply what happens when someone faces negative stereotypes, low expectations, and ongoing discrimination. So, for example, an immigrant feeling embarrassed about having an accent is internalized xenophobia. When a trans woman feels that they can never be a real woman, that's internalized transphobia. So, to review, the 4 I's of oppression are ideological, institutional, interpersonal, and internalized. Each of these types are interconnected and completely supported by the others. They can never exist on their own and can even be seen as a cycle. Now that you understand the different kinds of oppression, you're even more equipped to fight it. Don't forget that any effort to dismantle oppression should aim to address it at all 4 of these levels. Thanks for watching.
So yeah, so I thought that Dr. James, were you going to say something? I apologize.
No, please go ahead.
Okay.
I'm just really
No,
taking in that video. That was great.
no, and so that's just a small snippet. And really, if we really think about it, and if you really start thinking about, and just in our own lives, how the ideology, the institutional, the interpersonal, and then really the internalized, what messaging do we constantly send ourselves? And like the video said, it's interwoven. And then so sometimes, but we don't realize that. And so when we have to start addressing this, it's at multiple levels. And that's a lot of times it can become overwhelming. And I always tell people sometimes when I have this, number one, get in where you fit in. So you got to do the work. And then sometimes you just have to do something where if it may just be as simple as mentoring or working with a colleague, because you may not be able to change the whole institution, but at least you can help be there and support that colleague. And so this was a conversation I was having, and I'm sure several of you have seen this video before, or sorry, seen this slide before, and I've used it numerous times where we haven't thought about it is the barriers. And when we talk about equality, equity, and reality, and then liberation is when, okay, everything's great, and we remove the barrier. When we know that, so you can't see me, but I'm only 5 feet tall. So if it was equity, then you gave me and my spouse who's 6 feet tall, you give us the same box. I'm still not going to be able to see over the fence. However, even if you helped me and gave me more boxes so I can see over the fence, the other thought was, how did I get up there to get on them 2 boxes? It wasn't easy. I was a challenge, but we all know that we all come with all these because of the institutional oppression, the ideological oppression, and all those things. We all come with different boxes, or some of us are behind, already in the hole. And we try to say in America, this is just we all have the same rights, and just pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. Well, what if you don't have any bootstraps to even pull yourself up? But I was listening to a presentation a little about a year and a half ago, and then the conversation I was having later with the presenter. And we had this conversation, and it was Dr. Irving Vega who said, that is great that you remove the barrier from those individuals, but why aren't they sitting in the stands? And then when we had the discussion, is it because they were late? And because they didn't have adequate transportation to get to the game? Was it because maybe we don't see the narrative and those are actually prize seats? Maybe they didn't want to sit in the stands. They chose to stay off here to the sides. But so many times we're like, hey, you removed the barrier. But when we think of the upstream and downstream effects of the society and oppression, so the downstream would be, if I need a ride to my doctor's office, you're going to provide me with a ride. But the upstream is, why don't I have a ride to the doctor? Is it because the transportation in my community is poor? Is it because there's not equitable wages and I can't afford to get to the doc? I can't afford to have a vehicle, all those things. So when we really want to think about systemic change, is really looking at just beyond of, yes, we remove the barrier and now, yay, ain't it great? We can all see the game, but why can I not sit in the stands? And so that is one of the things I think when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion work, belonging work. And one of my mentors always says, she says, I'm going to stop saying just DEI, because I think we've almost trivialized it. DEI, DEI, DEI. And people are like, what is DEI? But when we really think about what it's committing to, it's not just committing to the diversity of numbers. It's not just committing to the equitable treatment of people. It's not just committing to the inclusivity of all people, but really ultimately belonging. And we want it to be an environment where our students, our faculty, our patients feel like they have a sense of belonging. So this is another quote I love. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. There's another, and I think I have it on my signature, that it says, and equality and equity is actually being part of the planning. And this other thing kind of speaks to some of the things I use too when we talk about equity, and even with our patients as us, not just, and I referenced it a little bit when we talked about we didn't all start on a level playing field. Some of us had more boxes than others. But when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how helping other people and our individuals, how can we get up the ladder? We all know that we are not provided with the same ladder. And some of our ladders are missing rungs. Some of them are broken, not for anything we did. We got there and the ladder was broken. I didn't do anything to it. It was broken when I got there. How am I going to get up the ladder? But then, and one of the passions I've really over the past couple years I've been looking, as I've been doing more of this work, is if I have a disability, what if I can't see the ladder? What if I'm neurodiverse and don't even really quite comprehend what I'm supposed to do get to the ladder? And a lot of times our individuals, colleagues, as well as our patients with disabilities, we don't even think about that group and making sure they have a voice at the table. So when we're really talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we should always be asking ourselves, and I'm going to use we a lot because I don't come on high with all this expertise. I come from a person who's continuing to work and grow and learn, hopefully, but asking who's in the room, who's not in the room, who can't get in the room, who haven't we heard from, and if they're not in the room, do we even have people to be invited to the room that look like. So for example, if I want to talk about Indigenous people and how we make it an inclusive environment for Indigenous people, but I have no Indigenous people to go to, why is that so? And again, looking at some of those institutional, societal factors, and always thinking about who haven't, and making sure everyone around the table has been heard and has a voice. And so this is one of my favorite slides. I use a lot. And it says, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. And so while we are in this work, sometimes we feel like it's, oh my gosh, I got to do all these trainings. I got to do this. People aren't, people are still making stupid statements. Oh, I got to go talk to this faculty member who did this. We still need to be at the table, and we still need to continue to face. And so I'm going to stop sharing, and I think we wanted to have some discussion, Dr. James. I'll turn it over to you.
We do, and that was, in a nutshell, a lifetime of work in such a encapsulated and powerful summary. I just, between the visuals, I'm a very visual person, so between the visuals and the short clip, it's just so much information. And sorry, I muted myself by accident. So rich with the information that's been provided. Going back to the slide on the baseball field, you talked briefly about what it would mean to have a seat in the stands, and kind of constructing a narrative about what went on to have the people in the stands versus being right at the side, almost on the field in the action. How is that a necessary part of moving forward with themes like diversity, inclusion, belonging, equity? Is it necessary for everyone to sit in the stands?
So I think it's important, because even if you're not sitting in the stands, you need to be given the opportunity to sit in the stands.
That's right.
And I think that's what's most important. A lot of people don't have the opportunity to sit in the stands. And so if you're not ever given that opportunity, if you're not ever exposed to that, then how do you know? If I've never sat in a box office, in the box seats where the owners sit, then I don't know anything different than sitting in the seats or those things. So I think it's really important to make sure that we're giving people the opportunity to sit in the stands, helping them sit in the stands, understanding why they're not sitting in the stands. I will tell you a scenario. I did a similar presentation not too long ago, and a colleague of mine, it was a grand rounds, and so she was on her way to work dropping off her son, and her son said, well, Mom, can't they just see the game better if they not sitting in the stands? Because, if you're on the side of the field, in his mind, you have better seats on the side of the field. So again, and then that made me reflect of, maybe it's better not to be sitting in the stands, And so I think those are always kind of the questions we should be continuing to ask ourselves.
And having a curiosity about it.
Yeah.
Right? Like being at least curious. And I really like what you said about opportunity, because to me it lends also to choice.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing let's talk about COVID. And when COVID first hit, and I actually do remember when COVID first hit, and I never forget, I was having this conversation early on, and my dad was like, do Black people even get COVID? And I was like, it's gone, because that's all. We didn't hear any Black people getting COVID. We quickly know that changed, right? But even we were being taught, well, people of color are getting COVID because, unhealthy lifestyles, we have hypertension, we have diabetes, But when it really got to it, it was talking about our minoritized and marginalized communities did not have a choice to not go to work. You know, they didn't have the opportunity not to work at home and things like that. And so again, we always have to think about that opportunity. You know, we talk about it when we talk about getting more students of color in our schools. And what is that opportunity? Have they had that opportunity? Do they even know what it looks like? What it's, you know, what it's like. Now they think they know what it takes to be an NBA ball player, which they actually really don't know. They don't know. Having someone in my family who actually played professional ball, they don't know what it takes to be a professional ball player, but they think they know. But you know, they look, well, I don't know, I can't be a doctor. I come from this neighborhood and that neighborhood. And so, you know, I try to, when the opportunity is right, when I'm talking to students and kids and stuff, you know, I share, you know, yep, I'm actually back in my hometown. And, you know, I went to that school and, you know, I went to Ottawa and my parents still live on Franklin, you know, and they're like, huh? And I'm like, yeah, I didn't, you know, because they think you woke up and you became a doctor and you're a millionaire. And I try to share with them because I think that's also very important, but making sure they know they have the opportunity. We're gonna have to work for it.
And I think the other difficulty as well is that when we talk about issues related to diversity, equity, inclusion, given the history of our country, unfortunately, it's been very hyper focused to differences in melanin production, as opposed to the number of intersections that limit people's choice. And that you may not just be someone of a different ethnic group, you may be a first generation immigrant, you may be a woman, transgender, non-binary. You may need or may have what is called, and I apologize for getting the terminology incorrectly, but an unseen disability, right? Neurodiverse patients. Like there are all these different intersections that continue to mount on and further limit choices. And it's hard to really, and it can become overwhelming trying to expand the scope of thinking around all of the intersections that may be stopping someone. And so when we address diversity in terms of numbers over here, we really may not be getting to the other intersections that are limiting a person's choice. And I think that's where affirmative action ended up getting a little trapped because because the thinking is, well, you know, more people who look like A, B, and C are here. So what's the problem? Well, you know, that may not be the only intersection that's presenting an obstacle or causing a difficulty.
Yeah. And you know, when Dr. Crenshaw in 1989 coined the term intersectionality, that was, you know, I'm a Black woman, you know, I'm an Asian male, I'm, you know, a queer. And one of the things is I think we, especially people of color, we always kind of realized we were kind of navigating those spaces, you know, but other people don't realize how we navigate those spaces. And so, but really realizing what comes with that. I always think affirmative action got a bad rap, gets a bad rap, because there's also a lot of my non-minority women who benefited from affirmative action, especially in the business world, because at one point those were minorities. And so, and now and then, you know, we always hear students say, well, so-and-so thought I got in because of affirmative action. And I actually was at University of Michigan when there was that lawsuit and all those things. But when you speak to that intersectionality, we bring all of those pieces to us, whether it's wife, mother, spouse, daughter, doctor, you know, whatever, friend, faith, auntie, you know, all of those. All of those things, and it's okay. And I think one of the things I think we have to realize is bringing that intersectionality and lived experiences. There's a richness in that.
Right.
And I think that's what's important. We can't always go, well, I'm just this and that, because I always tell people, one of the things when I leave and go to Myers, they don't see me as Dr. Lowery. I don't walk around my white coat, my stethoscope, and then, you're treated as a particular way. And that also, I think, was somewhat eye-opening for people in 2020, because despite that we were talking about driving while black, despite Trayvon, all those things that happened when we had that 8 minutes 48 seconds, as tragic as that was. Now, granted, nothing has really changed, unfortunately. I'll be the first. Then we said, we could say at least see ya. So that's what we've been dealing with. So there were people clutching their pearls. Oh my gosh. So I did a lot of conversations with people, was invited to spaces, and they said, well, Lisa, these were non-minority people, and they said, we want you to come in and have a conversation and so we can talk. And I'm like, I'm happy to, but what are we gonna talk about? Because if you want me to just come and I'm gonna be me. And I think, yeah, Dr. You were gone by then, right? Yeah, were in Toledo, and I was proud of our institution, where we had over 300 people kneeling in the football field near our hospital for 8 minutes. But I said, if we're going to have a conversation, let's have a conversation. And then our institution actually did a really good job of highlighting 3 doctors in our community and the macro aggressions they had faced at being, and those things. And so, but the thing is, I think sometimes people don't realize you carry all that intersectionality, and that's okay. And we should be valued by that. And I think we need to continue to value all races, all genders, all ethnicities. But I do agree, race is more than melanin. Yeah. Well, we know race is a social construct, so now, but sometimes I even have to tell the medical students, I said, when I was a medical student, we learned, you will present, this is a 43-year-old African-American person, because we learned this and this and this. And then we learn, about GFR and pulmonary and things like that. So now we're learning, oh, we had that all wrong. And I think also owning up to the students, I try to be very transparent. This is what I learned. I'm learning with you. Yes, this was wrong, because a lot of times they're like, well, they kind of come like, how'd you let this happen? So why? But medicine changes, technology changes, so that we grow.
We have a question from the chat. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Unfortunately, we are not even achieving the number benchmarks, particularly in medicine. How do we prevent the trivializing of paying attention to the numbers as an indicator for improving diversity, since we all know that diversity is so much richer, than degree of melanin production and appearance?
Yeah, I really think it's the culture. We have to change the culture. And I will tell you, one of the reasons we haven't changed the numbers is because we haven't changed the culture. We haven't changed. We haven't done anything different. So, when my medical students keep, say things like, oh, I was here and somebody said this and I'm like, really? So one of the things I think is we have to be, and this is the other thing, we have to be intentional about changing. Now, the next question is, how do we change and what does change look like? I don't know what change looks like. I'm still working on that one. But we change. And this is where I have the problem with trainings and workshops. I love to do them. I said, yes, you can bring me in for a microaggression training. You can bring me in for an unconscious bias training. However, I'm a pediatrician at heart. And I said, you don't get this, microaggression check mark and then you move on. It really is a commitment to lifelong learning. So I think as a pediatrician, you should get boosters, and you should change, but it's really about changing the culture, changing the environment. What do we do to make that change? But like I said, and I've had this conversation with my spouse. He's like, well, what does change look like? And it's hard because I want an environment where my colleague Dr. James, and I'm not gonna tell when she was at Spectrum. About 2 months later, she texts us like, "Can we talk? This happened." I'm tired of having those conversations.
Right.
Now granted, I'm also not the person to know that we still live in a racist, classic sexist society. We do. And so hopefully I can move the needle. But yes, we can't continue to keep paying attention to numbers, because actually the numbers are, we know, are even worse, especially in our especially for our African American men going to medical school and things like that. The other thing is, and this is the other thing when we talk about changing the culture, we really have to, and I hate to use this word because it's becoming trivialized now, is our allies. We have to be able to have those conversations, but realize that the 3 people at Toledo, the 2-3 people at MSU, the handful of people that look a certain way can't always be the ones leading the conversation. It has to be people. One of the most telling conversations I had probably was about a year and a half ago. I met with someone, older white gentleman, and he said, "Lisa, I'm on my second part of the career. He had just recently retired." And he says, "How can I be in a room? Because I know I'm going to be at the room and at the table, different tables than you're going to be. And I want to have a voice, and I want to be a voice. So how can I learn? How can I change?"
Mm.
I was like, wow. And I mean, and he came with sincerity. It wasn't this, "Hey, I want to meet with you. Let's talk about coffee." And then he followed up and, and he came with some literature, he was present and intentional. Now that was one man. But those allies and those accomplices that we're going to have to look at, because it's on, like you said, it's only y'all 3, and not all of you at Toledo. There's only 2 of us, me and Dr. Lipscomb at MSU. Most of us, it's not our full FTE so we have to look at how can we spread the work. And a lot of the work are going to be with not just our African Americans, our Latinx, our AAPI, but we're going to have to but it's also going to have to be our non-minoritized communities helping us do the work.
And that leads us really nicely into my next question. Because I know a lot about your journey, can you tell us about how people along the way have made space or advocated for you or became that voice for you in spaces where you were not represented, and how that impacted you for good or for bad?
Yeah, I will. The person, when I thought about this question, that really came to mind was my mentor, Dr. Eugene Schatz. He did Adolescent Medicine in Grand Rapids. I rotated with him as a medical student. And when I was doing med peds, I didn't say I was just gonna be a primary care med peds physician. I didn't have a plan to go out and do med peds. I mean, do adolescent medicine. My personal life changed. One of my friends said, she actually looked at me and said, "So you're gonna do your fellowship now?" And I said, "Say what?" We were on call in the MICU. I kid you not. That's the story. And I said, "Girl, we got 2 more years." And so, but anyway, I went to Dr. Schatz. He gave me some programs to apply to and so on. But I'll jump forward. So I had several mentors, some amazing mentors at Hopkins, who are still mentors: Dr. Hoover Adger, John Ellen, Dr. Maria Trent, who's done a lot of work in this area. She's just phenomenal. She's one of my sheroes. When I came back here to Grand Rapids, it was Dr. Eugene Schatz, and he's retired and moved way up north. But he said, "You're going to start being in leadership. I'm going to retire one day, and you're going to be section chief, and you're going to do this." And when he would come off boards, he would suggest me.
Wow.
And I mean, not like just because I'm a minority. He would suggest me. He's like, "You should do this, and I'm going to have you do this board." And then, as I said, he's like, "These are the leadership courses I think you should take, Lisa, because you're going to be a leader." And so he kept putting that in me. And really what we would call a sponsor. We use the fancy word sponsor, but that's what he really did for me. But he was also, now this is his daughter, well, his oldest daughter and I were the same age. So there was an age difference there. He was a Jewish man from Philadelphia, lived on a farm, had llamas, just a unique individual. And he's not dead. He just moved up north. So I'm sorry, because I always say, everybody said, oh, I said, no, he just moved up north, to the Upper Peninsula. But one of the things is I was really struggling, probably about 8-9 years ago. There was some leadership change, and the president of the Children's Hospital at that time called me up. And I think it was paged me. That might have been how long it was ago. And paged me. I called him back, and he says, Lisa, I said, yeah. He says, we're doing restructuring. I want you to be a section chief and such and such. And this division. So this meant I was going to be over like several, not just adolescent medicine, but several areas. And I will admit that was one of the hardest, probably 7 or 8 months, because there were people who I worked with, who I trained with, who felt like, why did she get it? Why, she was an outsider. And these are things like I know people said because it got back to me. Like it was, and that's when you start realizing who's in your corner, because then people who don't even look like you, like there was someone else, another physician who today I said, he said, you gonna watch so and so, just watch it back. I said, and I'm sitting there, huh? So
Right.
this is sometimes the people don't look like you. None of these people look like you and I, Dr. James. But Dr. Schatz, I never forget, I was really struggling during that time. And he looks at me and he says, Lisa, do you think they're not accepting you because you're younger than you, you're female, or because you're Black? And I did not want to say, well, because, I'm Black. He says, Lisa, it's all three.
Mm.
And to this day, Dr. James, I was standing up, I was leaning up, and my mouth hit the floor. And to this day, and not that, because it was honest.
Right.
And we have to realize that. And I'm sitting here, look, I got 73 degrees, and you gonna not, So
Right.
those are the things. But anyway, he was very formative, and there have been other people in my life, and as it's gone on, and I still continue to have mentors and people in my life. But when I would say from my leadership back then, and right now, one of the people in my career is Dr. Wanda Lipscomb at Michigan State. She's just a phenomenal. So, but yeah, those are the people who kind of helped me on my self. I mean, if I start naming too many names, but that I will always shout out Dr. Schatz.
And I wanted to use that to springboard or address one of the comments / questions in the chat from Dr. Wright. Amazing work, Dr. Lowery. Thank you. I'm in love with your ladder slide. It made me think of all of the empty duct tape rolls I've accumulated for over 40 years of fixing the rungs on the broken ladder that I was handed to climb. What's next for us? How can we proceed to get a new ladder for our next chapter? And then I want to read Dr. Thomas. Yes, Pete. The fact that we haven't changed is what's so frustrating about being a faculty member doing this work while packaged as a Black woman. What is difficult is that we often find ourselves leading this work. How do you find the support to push forward? And Dr. Lipscomb was also a mentor for Dr. Watson.
Oh,
So
yeah.
amazing full circle. But why I wanted to read through those comments is that in your story with Dr. Schatz, I think there's a key to moving to the question of improving choice. That sponsorship, allyship, it's more than coaching. It's being intentional about seeing the potential, the drive, the ambition, the work ethic, all of these characteristics that the introspection, like the ability to really think and reflect, all of these characteristics and apply them to anyone we see coming behind us who has the opportunity to push that needle forward. And someone like Dr. Schatz understood intersectionality and made the intention that this is someone who I see who has it. And that mentorship and that sponsorship with the mentorship even overrode individualized, internalized programming.
Mhm.
I think that's one of the keys to our future for our students of all walks of life, for our students, for our culture, for our colleagues, is that intentional, I'm here, I don't see other people who I think should be here, and what am I going to intentionally do to make sure that they have that space to be here? What are your thoughts? Future directions.
Wow, and I'm unpacking, I'm so busy trying to even unpack the ladder. That new ladder, that's like a sermon right there, the broken ladder. The sad it's so and so the thing is, it's multifactorial. And so one of the things is we're always balancing so much. And because I won't even like I thought about when you said some things, I thought about the black tax and how I was so much. Dr. James, I think you have to inhabit the space you're in and then try to make it a little better for the people that come after you. You need to remember, and this I'm speaking to because what you talked about is that internalized this because there's so many. I remember what was that the Sandberg book, Lean In. I remember I read that.
Sheryl
Just
Sandberg,
even Sheryl Sandberg, and just making sure I'm positioned appropriately at the table. Cory Booker, he said it to soon to be new Chief Justice. You deserve to be here. The problem with that is a lot of times we don't feel like we deserve to be there. We walk in the room, there's no one like us. And one of the things I will tell you, and I didn't say this, but my mother and my father, they're my biggest. My mother died when I was in high school, and my father, he's still alive and crazy as ever. Just a hilarious person. But I never forget. I was a nerd in school and I go to stuff, different stuff and government stuff. And I'd be like the only black person there a lot of times. And I come home, Mom, Dad, I was the only black person. And my mother be like, get used to it. Especially if you're gonna be a doctor, you're gonna be the only black person and sometimes the only woman. And I was like, okay. But they taught me that. And it delights me when, even though, I have the medical students go, well, it's not that many. It's more than it's more than when I was here. It's not as many, but we still need to keep moving forward. But I do think just, trying to be as visible as we can, trying to mentor. And sometimes it's just like, just being there for a person. And mentorship, everybody thinks mentorship is this, I got to meet with them 72 times a year and things like. It's just sometimes just being there for that individual, and for everyone it's different.
Right.
I When Dr. James was here, one of the things, we haven't done it because of COVID, I would have intermittent times where I would have all the women physicians over my house. We'd hang out and we'd chat. And that was just that level of camaraderie. And so sometimes it's those things. Is it a group me that you have? But also I still think when you're in those spaces, calling the question, why is I'm not why is I'm that's sorry about that bad. Why am I still the only one? Why is it only one? Why isn't this? And so continue to call into question. And then when we put in all this programming, make sure there's intentionality, there's funds, there's not people having to do it offside of the desk. Because I will tell you, when institutions speak with their money, then you know that they're speaking with, then they're really supportive of this. Yeah, otherwise you're just giving lip service. When the question about the broke ladder, why are we still getting broke ladders? By now I should have a titanium ladder. Why I keep giving a broke ladder that I got to fix with duct tape? And so we still have to ask that questioning, be questioning, why is this ladder not, why am I here to fix it? Those things. And so, but the thing is, and it gets exhausting sometimes. And we always have to step back. None of us have a cape and, an S on our chest for a super person. We need to take time to also work on ourselves too, and make sure we're still taking care of ourselves.
And speaking of that, going to the next, a little bit lighter, because a lot of this work, as you just mentioned, is super heavy. You're dealing with the past ladders, or again, if you're in the space where even laddering doesn't make sense for your intersection, you're in that space of dealing with not having some of these resources.
Mhm.
How do you make space for joy? What in this work and through your journey and through all of the different groups that you've made yourself an advocate and a voice for, what are some of the things that bring joy to this for you?
Well, first of all, I'm a woman of faith. I'm a woman of faith. No disrespect to anybody else's beliefs, but I'm a woman of faith, and I truly believe that I'm here, but for the grace of God.
Mm,
Um, I have been blessed over the past few years. I was sown into, and I know this sounds really, but to see people like our colleague, Dr. Candace Smith King. I remember she was a resident. Now she's DIO. Dr. Bragg. These people,
mm,
I'm sorry, people on the phone just don't know, but these are people I've known as medical students, and now they're programmed. I didn't even know what a neurointensivist was. I was like, that's a thing when I met you, and I will tell you one thing, and there was a student, an undergrad student that we mentored
mhm.
who is now going to be in residency. And
Oh,
this person posted a picture. And I looked at, and they were all medical students. They were medical students, residents. All of them are doctors. And so those are the things that bring me joy. Really seeing the growth of individuals. And I guess it's kind of selfish because at some point I want to retire and make it. But I stand on the shoulders of people like,
right,
that
Dr.
have done for
Schatz.
me, Dr. Schatz, so many others, Dr. Bradley, in our community. So that's really important to me. And I also take the time to enjoy stuff outside of medicine with my husband, with my
Mm,
friends. Um, and so I think those are the type of things we have to have that joy, because sometimes it can be so oppressive. So, we have to kind of step back. And I think it's also sometimes a step back because it's refreshing and say, okay, we are making a little bit of change. It's definitely not coming as quick and the way we wanted it to come, but we're doing making a little bit of difference.
And I'm paraphrasing a number of different authors, and I don't want to just throw names out there because I may, mispronounce or call an author's name incorrectly. But a lot of things that I've been looking at lately speak to the radical nature of just being present.
Mhm.
And that in groups that have to carry so many of these different identities and intersections, that sometimes some of their deepest work is just done by living their life.
Mhm.
And so that's been a source of strength for me that, yeah, it may not always be on a mic. You may not always have a protest sign in your hand. You may not always be screaming, but sometimes just enjoying the things you enjoy as a human being and deriving pleasure from that in spaces where people may not necessarily expect that is radical within itself. And to be able to find joy while dealing with some of these heavier topics is a radical act in and of itself.
Mhm.
And so you've always been one of the people that I've looked to who's been able to do that so effectively while tackling and advocating and working very hard for a cultural shift that allows everyone to have the most choice that they can possibly have. Always
Yeah.
appreciated that about you. And I'm going
Thank
to throw that out also to our panelists. If you wanted to throw in there, what are some of the things that give you joy as you navigate your space and your journey? And for those who may listen asynchronously after this is over, to take a second or two to reflect on that. How can I bring joy to this work and to any work of a degree of magnitude, right? Climate change, the uh, ravages of war across many countries, poverty, like all of these things are so difficult. Are there spaces where we can find joy? And how do we do that?
And I do think just bring up the conversation and being, like you said, being present. when there was a comment of how do you find the support to push forward, and sometimes it's just like Dr. James, you said, being in the space, or sometimes it might be, I'm going to advocate for this medical student, I'm going to advocate for this one change,
Right.
whether it be I'm going to say that we need to be put up progressive flags in our clinic space. Those are the things. But what happens is, and one of I think the good things about the past few is there are more people. I think there are some people willing to have the conversation.
Right.
Some people just don't know where to start.
Right.
And that's the other thing. I found people reach out to me and said, well, this is, Lisa, I found this book, or what about this? Or, they've shared a lot of things with me. And so I think those are the people that you look to and say, you know what, that might be someone that I can have that conversation with. Or maybe that's someone that when something's going on, that it will give you that little nudge or that little energy you need to do to push forward. um I think, and like I said, those are the difficult times sometimes.
Right. I think we've had a number of different questions. Um, I want to ask, and it goes back to Dr. Wright's question about our future. What are your aspirations for the future? What are some of your dreams for the future in this space or just in general?
Yeah, so I think if I hope that we're able to continue not just to have conversations, but make, and I want to say substantial change, where we have curriculum that is representative, that we train people that are representative of the communities we serve. If I had a pie in the sky, that we're able to continue to have these brave conversations, not safe conversations, these brave conversations. And then if I had a pie in the sky, that then institutions would fully back and make and move and make change. If I had a pie in the sky, I would love to have, some type of where we are able to expose communities to medicine as a career and interest them, and then and somehow help them navigate that. And realizing that for some people, saying you're going to go to medical school and be a doctor is just like the equivalent of you giving me a book about how to fly a 737. I don't fly. I'm not a pilot, so I have this. You give me this book. I don't know how to fly. But how can we do that? Um, and I think that's going to take real systemic money. That's going to take institutional ideologic pushing for. So if I had the pie in the sky and money wasn't an option, um, I remain hopeful for the students that we're training. I was just part of a sort of narrative medicine intercession, and the stories was like 20 people, very diverse group of students who did, and they told their narratives about medicine, what they then why they got into medicine, what they foresee in their future. Now again, all the medical students now want to change the world and say lies and things like that. I always laugh.
Well,
And
be
so,
fair, because we
yeah,
like that's what
that's what,
everybody,
that's why we
and
went
not
to
just
medicine. And
physicians, everybody,
yeah,
like our colleagues in nursing, our colleagues in
yes,
pharmacy, our
we
colleagues,
went
everybody went into this with, I'm going to be the one.
and you know what? I see it. And so
Mhm.
when I was gonna say, out of those 20 people, I was like, I can retire. And that's only a tenth of our class.
Of your
So
class.
of our whole class. So I look and I think, wow, with that, what you said, if only a tenth, a percentage of them, and even if a percentage, they do half of what they said, what they're gonna do, it's going to be amazing. We're going to leave it in good hands. And so, yeah, that's what I think. Hopefully, things will gradually get better.
Well, that's an amazing aspiration. And in that, I hear a lot of movement to critical action and not just critical acknowledgement, that we are moving into spaces where we're going to continue to have the action and the change that promotes growth. And so I think in your aspirations, I think it's just amazing.
Yeah,
I want to
thank you.
open the floor for any other thoughts, comments before we wrap up. Dr. Lowery, do you have any other final thoughts or comments?
No, I think the one thing that I try to be encouraged is there's a lot of work to be done. It can be sometimes daunting. I will say I consider myself kind of late in mid to late career, and I'm really re-energized by a lot of the work and things that I'm doing. It's heavy work. Um, but yeah, but I'm hopeful. There are days that I'm like, what? Ugh. And it can be so frustrating. Um, but I think even in this space, we also need to start. One of the things I will say, kind of an aside, that COVID taught us is that we're not that far away from each other and distance. And so, how do we partner together? Dr. Wright, how do I support you? Dr. Thomas, how do I support you? You
Right,
know, Zoom, WebEx, there's a lot of things
right,
that we thought I would have to get in a car and drive 3 hours, but there's a lot of
right.
things. And so I think that's the other thing. I think we need to continue to develop partnerships even broader than our
Right.
communities or our institutions and things like that. Um, yeah, and continue to be there to support each other.
Dr. Thomas says, wonderful talk, Dr. Lowery. Thank you for your work, insight,
Thank
and
you.
encouragement.
Thank
I could
you.
not say that any better. And it was such a pleasure to unpack. And to be honest, I'm still unpacking, especially with that video clip, to,
It,
to unpack and look at some of these definitions in a fresh way. Because, like you said, Dr. Lowery, we use them so frequently that sometimes they lose the meaning behind them. But to
yep.
have them reinvigorated is so important. And I'm so grateful that you've carved out this time to do that with us today.
Well, thank you, Dr. James. I really, you all have a jewel in Dr. James. She's so I will tell. Can I tell the story about how we met or how Dr.
Well, we
Bragg
may as
found?
well.
Yes. So I will
We
tell
may
you a
as
story.
well.
So when one of our friends was rounding and
Mhm.
saw her and like saw her walk and go into a charting room and like literally walked up to her and says, "Hi, I'm so and so. Who are you? How long you been here? Please don't leave." And proceeded to then email us like 5 minutes later. Was like, "Did you know so and so? She's here." And then like we bombarded her with all those emails. But that's the little things we gotta
Right.
do, y'all. Those are and then and we've been and then I think we met for lunch one time. I don't know
Right.
how we officially met, but yeah, and then been friends. So those are the little things, and I think and I tell that story because what if this person hadn't reached out to you?
But
Please
that's the
don't
thing,
leave.
and I don't mind saying it. I don't mind because Dr. Bragg, she's an
Yes, Dr.
internist by trade, and she was rounding, and it speaks so strongly to what you talk about when you mentioned earlier. The numbers are important, but even superseding that is a cultural shift. Because if we don't have that cultural shift, the numbers are not going to appreciably change. And I think that's what people who've been doing this work are really, it's really becoming apparent. And it's those small things that we tend to blow over and don't even tend to think that that's a part of cultural shift. That someone could just step out of their comfort zone and take 2 seconds to walk up to a stranger
And
and tell
harass you.
them welcome, and not just welcome, who are you, what are you doing, what happens in this space, like that level of curiosity, genuine interest, and authentic glee to see someone operating in that space based on their training. That's a cultural shift, and that's something small. Imagine how small that is, saying hi.
Mhm. And I think we need to do it because I'm from Midwest. I know, Toledo similarly. We have to figure out ways. So one of the things, and I've even been very transparent with our HR person. I was like, look, if you have somebody interviewing, please let me know,
Right.
and we really try to have a little web and really try and to be supportive of each other. We don't have to be in everybody's business. That's not what we're trying to do. But we're here, and like I said, we're so proud of Dr. James and what she's done, and we love you, and there's not a darn thing you can do about it, as they would say. And I have a friend now.
And,
That's a culture shift. Now,
and
granted,
it's a source of that community that provides that strength.
yes,
Because
yes.
on hard days, that's the community. And there's actually research behind that. We were just discussing that, having a buddy at work and what that actually means for when you go to work and having that sense of community. And that's one of the things that was so powerfully modeled to me in that story. We can individually create community.
Mhm.
We don't have to wait for our institutions. We don't have to wait for, and we can do small things to create communities, even with those who look like us, don't look like us, have different ideologies, what have you. There's so much commonality, there's commonality that we share. And in that, we can create micro communities that end up doing the microcosmic changes that then lump together to lead to big change.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
what you
And
guys taught me.
oh, well, thank you. You said that so eloquently. Yeah, but
Oh, I try. But again, any other final thoughts? Dr. Lowery, again, exactly what Dr. Thomas said. She's a pediatric intensivist who
yeah.
I have the pleasure of working with. So again, she wrapped it up. I think you provided so many insights. I'm going to be thinking this over. If you don't mind sending your slide deck again, especially with that video, to really keep some of these visuals and some of these ideas fresh. And that's what you've done for me tonight. And I hope for everyone who gets a chance to see your work asynchronously or who joined us tonight.
Thank you. Good seeing you, and thank you for the invitation. Be safe.
Yes, we're gonna have you back in
All
person.
right. All right.
Thank you and good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.